It's time to snap, it's time to tackle, it's time to pod, it's time to do all those things here on Snap Tackle Pod. Welcome to it. It's the high school football preview show each and every week right here via PrepsKC and KSHB 41. I'm Mick Shaffer of KSHB 41. He is Dion, Clisso of PrepsKC. What's going on, Dion?
If you couldn't tell, we're PrepsKC.
Yeah, I see it like 11 times, I think, there.
Yes. I mean, if you counted shirt, helmet, with the whining dog in the background, it's the whole thing. It's
the dog. I've got the pennants back here, right?
Yes.
We're sponsored by Illinois and Washita Baptist and Arizona State and many others.
Yes.
So
yes.
That's the core here. The KSHB
I see the
41 Sports
Mizzou with the old tiger over your shoulder. So
well, basically, it's all people's alma maters who work or have worked at KSHB 41. So there's a lot of Mizzou people here. A lot of Mizzou. There's some Oklahoma Staters up there and some smaller schools out of Alabama and other states. There's a lot more right here, but yeah, that's what we decorate with. All right. Well, hey, welcome to the podcast. Whether you're listening, whether you're watching, we appreciate it. Heading into week 3 for Missouri, heading into week 2 for Kansas high schools here. Dion, let's kind of start with last week, I guess, and we'll work ahead here. More surprised by Park Hill beating Rockhurst last week, or Liberty North, not really beating Liberty, but just hammering them the way they beat them. What surprised you the most?
Well, Park Hill has got athletes, and Andy Sims is a good coach, and we know that they didn't play real well in week 1.
That week 1, I think, was a misleading score. I think they're pretty close on all the stats, but some big plays really helped Lee Summit West.
Yeah, so I think that just shows how the depth of the Class 6 schools on the Missouri side are. That Park Hill's a team that didn't look real good in week 1, and they get out on a lead on Rockhurst and do a good job against them and get them into overtime. Rockhurst goes for 2 in overtime, doesn't get it. And that's kind of a Kelly Donahoe thing, even though I think he's got better kickers at Rockhurst than he ever had at Blue Springs, with the exception of a couple different ones. No, it's one of those things that, Rock's going down to Bentonville, Arkansas this week, and that puts him in a spot to
– They could be on 3.
Yeah, they could be on 3. But then you look at Liberty North.
Because Bentonville's they've already beaten Liberty North, correct?
Yeah. It was 41-30. That game was about a 2-touchdown game early, and then Liberty North played with them and kind of pulled back the stutter a little bit there, and it really showed, I think, after what we saw last week with what they did to Liberty, that was a really good showing in a loss at Bentonville. And I think shutting Wintrick Williams down to 40 yards and really making Liberty beat them left-handed, saying, hey, you got to throw the ball. And the Liberty defense, which gave up a ton of points the first week to Blue Springs, gave up a ton of points to that Liberty North. And Liberty North might be the deepest team out there, especially like receivers. They've got 5 or 6 of them that are all kind of interchangeable. They got 2 really good running backs. They got 2 good quarterbacks. They're big on the offensive line. Defensively, they're good. Their linebackers, the sophomores, getting all kinds of D1 looks already. So this Liberty North team, Ray Peck is still the king. They go there this week.
We'll find out this week, right?
We're going to find out this week. But, we've always kind of thought ourselves, if we could, back when it was 1 district, we knew there'd never be 2 Kansas City teams in the state championship game in Class 6. And then they went to 2 districts, and it was like, well, we're both on the same side. We have to beat each other up. And then they started rotating the districts. And, there was, I think in 2015, when Blue Springs South won, Blue Springs got to the district final game and lost, which is the quarterfinals. And it was like, oh, could we have 2 teams? This might be the best chance we've got, because it's so deep here. You've got one district that has Liberty North and Liberty, and the other district has Ray Peck and Lee Summit North, and they're good teams. And Rockhurst and Park Hill's up with Liberty and Liberty North. So there's a lot of depth there, so that when you come out, if you're not too beat up, you get to the semifinals. We could have 2 teams, and very well could be Liberty North and Ray Peck.
I want to see it in Missouri. We've been waiting for it to happen in Kansas too, but Derby doesn't cooperate over there on the west side of 6A, because we've got both Lawrence schools. Gardner's over there now in the west. Is it late the west? I want to say there's maybe
not yet. I would say the next cycle you could see Olathe West, or if a Mill Valley were to move up, they could maybe start going west too. I mean, that's kind of out there as well. So
like the West is still west of Mill Valley.
Of Mill Valley, yes.
Mill Valley's on the east side of K7. I like the West on the west side. It's close, but that's the case. All right. So Fort Osage and Lee Summit West, 2-2-0 teams. We mentioned the Titans a little bit here. Who's more for real in your mind? 2-0 teams that could win so far?
I like Fort Osage. I like what they're doing. I think that they're a little more put together. They got one quarterback. Lisa West is still running two, trying to feel their way through a little bit. But I think that this Fort Osage team has been playing since they were sophomores. A lot of them who are seniors. They've got a lot of experience. Not that I'm down on Lisa West. I just and I'd go so far as to say that Lisa West's competition level has been higher. But I think that I think that Fort Osage is playing better. And they've got North Kansas City this week. It's one of our Remax Big Three games, and that's a fun game. And I've talked with Coach Douglas from our radio show, and he said this is a game that he goes, it's a rivalry game for North Kansas City. He goes, especially now that we are starting to hold up our end of it the last few years. He goes, but he goes, that's something that we try to pattern ourselves off of Fort Osage. He goes, and the friendship between those coaching staffs and the head coaches, first Leon Douglas and Ryan Sharps, and now Brock Bolt. Back in 2012, Ryan Sharps was winning an all-star game. His defensive coordinator was Leon Douglas. and Leon Douglas has been a defensive coordinator for a couple of winning all-star teams, and he was the head coach this last year. So there's a lot of respect between those two programs, which makes it fun. They're both good, which makes it fun.
Yeah.
And that's I think it's a good test for both of them. I mean, North Kansas City got beat by Raytown in week 1 and didn't look really physical doing it. On the offensive side, they got kind of out physical. And they beat a St. Joe Central team that's got good athletes, but they were able to kind of impose their will in that one. So this is a good stepping stone up. I mean, they were pushed into it the first week with Raytown and now North Kansas City. And same for Fort. Beat a St. Joe Central team, beat Staley, and now it's a little bit, they're stepping up a little bit.
Yeah. How about this for Lee Summit West? After Lee Summit this week, they go Liberty at Ray Peck, at Rockhurst, Blue Springs, at Liberty North, Lee Summit North. That's you'll find out who you are in that 6 stretch there.
It's gonna get tougher for them. There's no doubt. And but it's they've already gotten Blue Springs South off that list, and that's kind of the bottom of the league, unfortunately for Blue Springs South. But no, it's a tough run for Lee Summit West, and a team like Lee Summit North. I mean, they've beaten Lee Summit and Blue Springs South. So it's like their schedule gets tougher this week with Liberty. And they're going to start to find out exactly who they are.
All right, over on the Kansas side, who had the better win last week in week 1? Blue Valley North over Miege or Blue Valley Northwest over Blue Valley Original?
I think I go with Blue Valley Northwest. I think Miege is a little not your father's 6-time champion, Miege.
Yeah. They're a 4A school, a lot of years in name only, right? But Blue Valley was considered to be one of the better teams. It still could be one of the better teams in 6A. Yeah,
and I think Blue Valley North is a dominant team. I just feel like that Blue Valley and Blue Valley Northwest is a little closer, and I think that the performance of Blue Valley Northwest was interesting because Mikey Pauley threw 2 bad interceptions in that game, but then led them
run
down.
more than he passed.
He did run for more than he passed this week, and no, it was definitely a fun game for them. And I think that Miege is still in the mix in Class 4A. I think them and St. James are probably still the favorites.
Oh yeah. I think they both lost. Well, I know they both lost this week, but to quality opponent, and they stayed 1-2 in the polls.
Yes. Yeah. So I think they're still. I still think they're probably the best. I think the rest of the pack is starting to come up on them a little bit. So it's going to be interesting this year. And I'm sure that if a Paola or a Lewisburg were to get
who is the rest of the pack?
I'd say, Paola's there. Basehor Leavenworth, who last year was in all those shootouts, right? Remember that? if you got a Basehor Leavenworth game, you better get to 50 because they could score and they couldn't stop you. So I was talking to Coach Stahlbaumer, and he's like, we're real happy with our defense. We returned 9 starters for that defense, and they held Tonganoxie to 6 points. Yeah. So I think that's a little, the new quarterbacks, some new receivers, a little more run heavy team, but Basehor Leavenworth could be there. Piper is much improved. Eudora is much improved. So there's teams in there that can make some noise. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it's good to see. I mean, look, this time last year, St. James was part of the pack, right? And they broke through and were able to beat Miege and then go over to the west side and beat the best team over there and win the 4A title. All right. I want to talk one Simone guy here. In my notes, I wrote down here, Jace Reynolds, oh my God. That's what I wrote down a few hours ago. But I think that sums up his first 2 weeks very well, right?
Yeah, no, he's and it's funny because his brother is their other running back, and somebody was joking today that between the two of them, they've almost got 1,000 yards in 2 games, and it's pretty close to that. And yeah, I mean, there's that rare occasion where a 4A kid can make a sniff at the Simone, and if he hangs $3,000 up there, which he's somewhat on pace to do, he would definitely be a guy that would be a part of that conversation.
Allowed to go for the Simone in Class 4?
Yeah, you can. It's a rare occasion. I think you remember
Bishop Miege quarterback.
Bishop Miege quarterback. I'm totally Ryan Willis.
Ryan Willis, yes.
He was up there, and he was a finalist for that. And so it's a rare occasion, and I think sometimes it's left up to you are technically, the rule is if you're eligible for the Fontana, you're eligible for the Simone.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's been situations where coaches have said, well, I think he could be a Simone semifinalist or maybe a Simone finalist. I think he's going to win the Fontana, because you can't win the Fontana and the Simone.
Oh, you can't?
So you can't win both.
But you can win other awards. You could win Buchanan.
You can win the Buchanan and the Simone, or the Bell, or the Taylor and the Simone. So yeah, that's the kind of situation that is there. So we'll see. I mean, Jace he's playing both ways for them. They're going to have to manage his minutes.
Oh, is he really?
He's playing some safety too. Yeah, and so I think that'll be interesting to see how they do there. And they're going to get in the meat of their. They've got 2 pretty good games to start with. I'm not downgrading the first 2 games. Maryville and that Wayne Hills, New Jersey team is really good, but they've still got Odessa and Center and Oak Grove and Pleasant Hill and Warrensburg, who are all very good teams to go through in that MRBC West. And it's going to be a grind, and how his health is able to go. And if they are able to find a quarterback, they've got 3 right now that they're playing, and kind of settle down, and maybe that'll open up some of their passing. I don't think they intend to pass much at all, but enough to keep teams honest.
I would. He's got over 500 yards rushing in 2 games.
Yeah, no, and the average is huge. I mean, it's not like
10.5 yards per carry.
Yeah, his touches aren't crazy, so that's good. They've done a good job of that. So yeah, no, he's a guy who jumps off, and Jaden Doss had 5 carries, 100 yards, and a touchdown last week.
Doss is going to be up there. Van Dyne with Liberty North.
And so Henry Martin had 6 touchdowns last week. And
Mikey Pauley.
Yeah. So there's a lot of good names. And Carroll, the running back, Sean Carroll, running back from Aquinas, I think is going.
Aquinas had a good first, to over 200
good first. And so he's going to be a guy to keep an eye on as well. So it's a pretty wide open this year. I think it's as wide open as it's been for a long time.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about these Remax Big 3 games of the week. Games you can find at PrepsKC.com. Check them out. All right, you have Blue Valley North and Blue Valley West on the Kansas side, Dion. We've kind of thought of the Blue Valley schools, maybe a 3-pack of quality schools, Northwest, North, and Original. Could West join that pack? Could it be a 4-pack?
I think West is pretty good. And I think that they were, they had a new quarterback last year who really didn't get a full season of getting in there and getting a chance to start. And he's really taken a huge step forward this year, Gage Roach. And they were impressive against Blue Valley Southwest. I think that they are a team that is better than people give them credit for. A couple of years ago, they had Olathe North who went to the state championship game on the ropes. I thought they had them beat. And that was a Blue Valley West team that was probably good enough to go play in a state championship game. And so, they've got some good talent, and I think it's going to be a good test. I think it's going to be a shootout. I think it's going to be crazy with both these teams, because they both can score. So
yeah, absolutely. All right, from the Frontier League, Eudora and Piper. Eudora's got a couple D1 kids, right?
Yeah, they've got some good kids there, and their tailback is really good. They, looking back last year, they won 3 games, and Coach Walmsgans and I were like, why are we talking about Eudora so much for a team that won 3 games? If you look at their last 5 games, they went 1-4, and the biggest deficit they lost by was 4 points.
Wow.
They were in every game, and they beat Piper in the first round of the postseason, went for 2. They were down 15-0 in the fourth quarter, scored 2 touchdowns and 2 2-point conversions, the last one with no time left on the clock to win that game. So yeah, they're kind of private. They got Piper this week, and that's a good game in the Frontier League. And Piper's an athletic team, but they've got some size this year, and they're trying to be more physical and be that way. And it's funny because we talked with Coach Pollard, and he said, this is a fun game for him, and because he and Sean Hayden, the coach at Eudora, have become really good friends. He said, we came in the league the same year that he was hired at Eudora. He goes, I talked to Sean 3 times a week. It's like he goes. I root for him every week except this week. he's like, you know, he goes more, and he goes, it makes it even more fun, you know, because we're going to go compete hard against each other, and we know how much the other guys and staffs put the work in. The kids work hard, so it's a fun game in week 2. I think it's a fantastic conference.
Yeah, both those teams coming off blowout wins in week 1, button heads this week in week 2 on the Kansas side. All right, Basehor and Leavenworth.
Yeah,
Basehor, their outstanding wide receiver, outstanding basketball player, Jordan Brown, transferred over to Lawrence Free State, had a touchdown in week 1, taking on a Leavenworth team that I don't know much about. Tell me about the Pioneers this year.
well, you know, I think they won 4 games last year, which is a lot of games for Leavenworth to win. And I think
a shortened year too.
In a shortened year, like 4-4. And so they're coming on. Sean Sation. It's hard to say his name. Sean Sation.
Okay.
The coach there has been their head coach now for about 3 years. He took over, and really just, I mean, he was at Immaculata before that, the private school that was in Leavenworth. And they were pretty good. There were some stretches where they were pretty good. And so he's done a really good job. And they had a group that was really young the last 2 years, and now they're seniors and they're really growing up. And I think they're a pretty solid team. I think defensively they're really good. They've got some good athletes. And we talked about Basehor earlier. You know, they're running the ball. They do as good a job as anybody is fitting their offensive scheme to the talent that they have. And it's a situation where this is a good game for both these teams early in the season. Class 5A and 4A team, go out there, find out what you're about. The Leavenworth's already got a road win at Shawnee Heights. And so, you know, for Basehor went to Tongi last week and got a win there. So, but they both have good wins. And I think if you come out of this healthy and not make a ton of mistakes and get blown out for either team, I think you come out of it pretty good.
Yeah, I forgot. They ended up losing to DeSoto in the playoffs, but they should have beat DeSoto a few weeks earlier in the regular season, had them down, ended up losing that game by 7. If you're talking about DeSoto, you're talking about one of the better teams in 5A. So Leavenworth was right there.
Yeah, they had a great season last year, and you could tell that, you know, it's tough there. I mean, they get move-ins and moves out with the military base.
Oh, yeah.
So it's tough to be consistent, but if you can get it going and get the numbers of which they have done, there is a huge investment in sports in Leavenworth. They just got brand new baseball and football fields. They invested a ton a few years ago in their football setup and their locker rooms and things like that. So they are serious about their sports, and they're trying to get better and everything. And you can see it takes some time sometimes to really see how it was going. Cause Leavenworth used to play in the field down by the river. And some people told me that the mosquitoes there were the size of small planes. They said it was ridiculous. And, you know, it was like, and it says you wanted to play them late in the year, not early in the year, because you get eaten alive. And so they have an on-campus stadium they've had now for quite a while. I mean, it's been 6-7 years that they've had that stadium, but no, it's good to see that program, and they're in with teams that they can compete with now. And
well, they used to be 6A. They used to
be 6A, and they're in there with the Sunflower guys, and now they're over with the UKC, and it's a great league for them.
Yep. All right, Missouri side. Let's not beat around the bush here. Let's get to it. Liberty North goes to Ray Peck, I believe.
Yep,
right?
Yep.
Liberty North 1-1. We talked about their opponents so far, Bentonville and Liberty. Ray Peck has played good teams. Both times they'll win by a touchdown. We'll really find out if this is, a championship team yet again, I think, this week with Ray Peck.
Yeah, and it's funny because they've played now. This is the 5th time in a little over 2 calendar years they've played, because they played twice the last 2 years. And it's the first time they played. It's a 4th time maybe. It's the first time they played at Ray Peck, because they played the regular season game.
Oh, really?
And the playoff game 2 years ago at Liberty North, the regular season game at Liberty North last year, and the playoff game again at Liberty North, because that's the way the brackets fell out last year. So Ray Peck is probably happy to have this game at home. It's a great atmosphere at Ray Peck. I hadn't been to a game at Ray Peck in a long time. Went a couple years ago for the DeSmet semifinal game that they lost. And it's really, when Ray Peck's going, that's a good place to play. And Greg Jones is, I didn't know, Greg Jones and Tom Cruise go back to Northwest, and then Sean Martin
were they teammates?
They were teammates for a short amount of time, and they were GAs together. But Sean Martin was a GA Greg Jones's senior year, and then they were GAs together for a while. So I mean, it's like Jones, and he said, I know so many of those guys. He goes, I've known so many of those guys for so long, and he's real excited about the game. They really like playing each other. This has become a pretty good. When Greg Jones came to Liberty North, it's become a pretty good little rivalry between them. And now they're in the same conference. They're going to play every year, and it's really fun to see. And as much as it was enjoyable from knowing that your Blue Springs and your Rockhurst and your Blue Springs South had a 15-year run, that you're pretty much guaranteed one of them being in there, or one of them winning it. And they were probably the favorites almost every year between the three of them. Having Liberty North, Ray Peck, you've got Elise Summit North who's moving up the ladder, and Liberty, who played really well last year and has been pretty good. It's really fun. And I'll tell you, Ray Peck is on a run right now. I mean, they were really good, lost in the semifinals, won a state championship, looked like they could be a favorite again this year. Liberty North is at the beginning of what could be a run too. A lot of these guys are still juniors on this team, and Greg Jones, for early in the season, preseason, I said, a lot of people were talking about you. He's like, I don't know. We only got like 4 starters back on both sides. And I said, your freshman team has lost 1 game in 5 years. So, I mean, they've been dominating everywhere. And it wasn't just like, oh, hey, look, the freshman won by a touchdown. No, it's like, oh, hey, look, the freshman won by 50. Yeah. Again. So they are loaded. They're 5 years into him running that weight program. And we've seen what he can do in the weight room with teams. So this Ray Peck Liberty North run could be the two of them and a few others for the next few years.
I like it. Fort Osage and North Kansas City, we've touched on both of them a little bit so far. They're playing each other this week. Another pair of 2-0 teams.
Yeah, and it's really like we said earlier, it's a fun one for them to play. I like the way Fort Osage is playing. Greg Meany, their quarterback, and Lorenzo Fenner, their outstanding receiver. They're running him. They're doing a little Jaden Dawson to him. He's starting to run the ball a little bit. They've got a good running back too. And Fenner is a dangerous guy in the return. I think he may have had touchdowns called back in each game this year. He's had 2.
I think City's 1-1. I missed
1-1. Yeah,
lost to Raytown. Yeah,
but no, I think Fenner has had a touchdown call back on a return, like in both games.
Oh wow!
So he can. You don't want to kick it to him, and you'd think that it would be that easy, but it's not that easy sometimes in high school. But no, I like Fort Osage and North Kansas City. They're still finding their offense, I think. Kind of getting their line together. They want to throw the ball a little bit more this year, be a little bit more dynamic in that area. They ran the ball a lot better last week. So their offense is still a work in progress, but their defense is really good.
And finally, one of the finalists for our game of the week on KSHB 41 here got second place, got like 42% of the vote, but couldn't catch up to Gardner and Olathe North. So that'll be our game of the week on KSHB 41. But this will be a good one as well. Center. Is it hosting Oak Grove? I think Oak Grove goes to center. Is that right?
Yeah, Oak Grove goes to center. This is the rematch of an overtime game last year. Both of these teams are loaded with players who played last year. Center has two seniors on that team. And Coach DeLong was like, hey, I love them. They're great, but there's only 2 of them. So all these guys played as sophomores last year. They're juniors, and they've got some sophomores playing this year. So centers, what they probably lack the most is just some size and some toughness up front. They're a little more finesse because they're just young. They're still growing in their bodies. Oak Grove is going to pound it. They're going to want to play, but they're coming off a tough loss. They got rolled by Richmond last week, and Richmond's a good team. So it's definitely going to be an interesting contest to say the least. Like I said, last year was an overtime game, and it could be that close again if Center doesn't break off some big long runs and their athletic ability just overwhelms Oak Grove.
Yeah. Lastly, here before we get out, I know your dog Dion is ready for you to end the show.
Poor guy's been up all day. We're doing a lot of recording today. The poor guy's been up all day. He's been a really good dog.
We want to know here in the 41 office who's going to win the 41 Bowl this week. It's Haley Lewis's dad, Craig Lewis, taking on my son, Aiden. Mill Valley taking on Olathe South.
I like your chances in this. I think Mill Valley's probably a little further along this year than Olathe South is, and I apologize to Coach Craig Lewis, one of the best guys in the world, he's overcome his daughter.
I love it. He's here right now.
I mean, he's just as good a guy that you can think of. So no, he's a good one, and I think they're going to get better. They've got some good size at Olathe South, and if they're not playing Mill Valley or Olathe North, they've got a really good chance to win a lot of games.
Yeah. No, definitely. All right, that'll do it for Snap Tackle Pod. Dion, do you want to let us know some of the other games we'll be covering on Friday night, both on PrepsKC.com and on KSHB 41?
Well, as we've recorded this, there's been some changes, so I'm going to have to go back and look at my schedule and make sure we're all in a good place. And no, we're going to have Ruskin at Wyandotte. That's the Deepest Valley Moore Metro matchup game.
Nice.
We'll have coverage of that, and that's going to be a good one. I
I
think it's a
love
good
the
one.
Kansas v. Missouri. We got another one. Is it Lee Summit Blue Valley this week? Is that another one? Or is that 2 weeks
That's
now?
2 weeks, I think. There's some Blue Valley matchups there with some Lee Summit teams as well. So I like that Wyandotte Ruskin game. I think it's a good game for both teams, both in similar positions, good numbers up and things like that. So that's a good one to keep an eye on.
Richmond, I think, right? Or Bishop Ward, Richmond.
Bishop Ward, Richmond. Hats off to Bishop Ward. They had a good win over Sumner last week. Richmond is really good.
Yeah.
School size wise, they're about the same size. So Bishop Ward trying to improve that program. They stepped up and they picked up a good game with Richmond.
Last
so they
week
can compete there.
What we saw, what was it? Odessa going to Lansing, right, and getting a big win there.
Yeah, you got to do that sometimes. And no, it's definitely good to see some cross-state stuff.
All right, we'll end it. Dion, thanks so much for the time. Thanks to you as well for watching or listening to Snap Tackle Pod. We'll see you next time.